All right. So I promised you evidence. Here's the evidence. All right. Going back to the history. Going back to the history. Um, so one of the things I had to study when doing the paper that I was talking about was I had to study how the United States developed its economy um, after it became a country, after the revolution of 1776. I studied that because the U.S. turned into one of the most powerful economies in the world, especially in the 1900s. And so I studied how they developed their economy, and I also studied how England developed its economy, and how France and all the Western European powers developed their economy. Because in the paper, what I did was I looked at the political economy, which again is the way that government and finance, how government sets the laws for in which finance works. That's political economy. I looked at how the political economy worked in those countries, and then how the political economy was working in these African countries, and did a comparison. And of course, what I found was that the laws and the economic policies in the African countries were the complete opposite of what they needed to be in order to be successful. And that's because they were the complete opposite of the laws that the U.S. used to build its economy, England used to build its economy, so on and so forth. And again, this deals with, we talked about one big aspect earlier was free trade. Um, there was no free trade in England and the U.S. when they were developing their economies. And with good reason, because you can't invite more powerful, more resourceful, more organized economies and businesses into your country and into your community and expect them to compete and expect your local businesses to compete with that if you're not on that level. It won't compete, it will wipe you out. So there was no free trade. Okay, and I'm gonna give all the evidence to back this up. Trust me, I'm just laying the groundwork right now. So another big principle was the manufacturing. Manufacturing is all it. When I'm talking about these neighborhoods that are thriving, where the dollar. Something else I was gonna say about that real quick, and I know don't lose your place. I was gonna come back. I'm gonna come back. I know where I'm at. In some of these communities, I'm talking modern day now. Modern day. I'm jumping back and forth, but just stay with me. In some of these communities that you see nowadays, where they have community economic principles in place and they have been in place for generations, and the wealth has been generated for generations, and you're a part of a network. Usually, it's based on ethnicity. So you have your Jewish network, you have your white American network, you have your Latino network, you have your Asian network. Right now, it's culturally defined, but whatever network you may be a part of, do you know that? Okay, again, the reason they're so successful is because the money stays in the community so much. You've heard the analogy: money stays in the community. It flips over. It changes hands 12 times, 13 times, whatever. That's all we're talking about. You come spend your money with me. That's one time. I come spend we're all in the same network. I spend my money with him. That's two times. He spends his money with her. That we're all in the network. That's three times. It flips like that. So that's spending money in the community. Did you know that if you're a part of something like that, a part of some real old money, and you decide to go outside of the network and spend your money, that the people in your network, if they find out that you spent your money outside the network, you will be ostracized from the network. No one will come. The community will not support you anymore. You get blackballed for spending your money outside the community. Look how far away we are from those. I'm not saying that's the right or wrong thing. I'm just saying look how far away we are from those principles. That none of the money we spend, a small percentage, less than 5% of the money we spend, goes to support our community. Okay, and I'm talking specifically about the black community, more specifically the poor black community. I hate using the word poor because we're not poor. It's just, we're thinking poor and making poor decisions. We're not poor. So historically, this is how the U.S. built up their economies. This is how England built up their economies, by manufacturing, by making things, and then protecting those businesses that were manufacturing until they could compete with the bigger businesses. Let me give you an example. When we were building our steel industry, and you can look this up, you can Google it. When we were building our steel industry, there was the government set it up, and this is what I'm talking about. When the government wants to set laws that'll benefit you, this is what they look like. The government set up a law that imposed a 200% tax on importing steel from outside the country. 200% markup on purchasing steel outside the country, so that people would be more inclined to purchase our steel. It was also a several 100% increase to the steel industry itself if they wanted to sell steel outside the country. So 200% on the tax coming in, 200% on the tax coming out. Okay, actually, I don't know what the tax was coming out. I don't know if it's, but I know if you wanted to purchase it from outside the country, it was 200% markup. So what's that going to do? What effect is that going to have? If you're running a business, you're not going to buy steel from France or wherever if it's 200% more than what they're selling it for off bat. They're selling it for whatever, and then the government is paying, you got to pay a 200% tax on top of that. You're not going to buy that. What are you going to do? You're going to go to them cats in Philly and Pittsburgh that's making the steel, and you're going to say, let me get it. Let me get it, because I can get it from you for cheaper. That's how they encourage the business, right? What they did to the African countries was they gave financial incentives for outside businesses to come into the country. It's a clear dichotomy. To be successful, you had to stop the more advanced, more evolved businesses from coming into the community. But what they did in Africa was they set the law so that it was easier for the businesses to come in. And then, of course, the multinational corporations came in and they wiped the African businesses out. The local businesses stood no chance. Your local textile dealer can't compete with, Macy's or whoever's doing it on the international scale. They can't compete with that. Just like mom and pop can't compete with Walmart. You don't put them on the same playing field. It's not fair. They're going to lose every time. But that's what they're counting on. That's what they're counting on, right? So in order to build up the manufacturing base, and they did the same thing in England. They did the same thing with England with the wool trade, and they did the same thing in England with the wool trade and with the with like the Navy or something like something that had to do with the Navy. It was a tax if you wanted to get your product from outside the country and bring it in, and it was a tax. It was a tax to sell your stuff here. It was to sell outside goods within the country. So if you wanted to send it out, or if you wanted to get it from somewhere else, you had to pay a tax that did not make it economically viable for you to purchase that object. So therefore, you did not purchase that product or service, and you purchased it from the local dealer. Which a lot of times they would even give you a subsidy on that, saying if you're going to purchase this inside the country, we'll give you a discount. Maybe you don't have to pay taxes on it. Maybe you get it for a reduced price. That's how you build industry. That's how you set the laws so that people are successful. So that economies are successful and countries are successful. Those are the laws. Because it encourages local manufacturing, which means you're selling. And that's what we've lost. And that's how we get it back. With the manufacturing, with the producing. That's why we need entrepreneurs to make stuff, to sell stuff to each other. It's the same thing, except on a smaller scale. Just like England was selling wool, just like the U.S. was selling steel, we need brothers and sisters selling soap, selling clothes, selling food, selling electronics, selling hardware, selling services, selling everything. Everything that we need to survive as a society needs to be bought and sold by us, to us. Okay. Um, so that's how. So when I saw, okay, so this is bringing it back full circle. So I read up on the principles that made the U.S. successful. I read up on the principles that made England successful. These great, powerful economies, right? And then I saw they were doing the opposite to Africa, right? But then I saw it come back to us because this is where I'm really going to drive this point home is that now our laws aren't set up like that anymore. You've heard of outsourcing, where if I'm Nike and I'm making shoes, I'm gonna take my company to a developing country where I can get that process for pennies. Pennies. So the financial incentive is there for me to take my production process, which is a manufacturing process, which is what a country needs to be successful. The financial incentive is there for me to take it outside of the country. That doesn't benefit us because now it's not American workers making those shoes, getting paid a wage so that they can spend money in an economy in their communities and live a life, but they're getting some people 10,000 miles away are getting paid pennies to do it. Okay? And the laws are set up to encourage that because there is no penalty. It's only a benefit. Got me spitting on the screen. It's only a benefit. Okay? If they wanted to stop that, they would charge the same. They would do the same thing. And they can't. They stop letting Congress and politicians plead incompetence. They're not incompetent. Some of them are. Some of them don't know what's going on, but some of them do. And the reason you know this is because 200 years ago, when this country was getting on its feet, these are the laws that they put in place. And now these are the laws that they're running from because they don't want those laws in place because they want the country to fail economically. For reasons that, you can get into a bunch of conspiracy theories about why or why not. But the fact remains that they're setting the laws in such a way where we are guaranteed to fail. We are guaranteed to fail. We are not manufacturing anything. When is the last time you turned something over in your house and it said made in the USA? I bet if you was rocking around in the 60s and 70s, if you remember, if there's you flipped it over, there was a good chance it said made in the USA. You flip it over now, it says China. It says Japan. It says Taiwan. Because they're manufacturing stuff and we're buying. They're selling, we're buying. But what are we selling? Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with buying. Buying is an integral part of this. But there has to be a balance of buying and selling. What are we selling? We're not selling anything anymore. We're not making anything anymore to sell. Real quick, I'm gonna break down why it's so important. Okay, so I'm talking a lot about selling. Let me break down the economic mechanics of why it's so important to sell. Okay, so take a raw. Okay, so say you're a country. We're a country, right? We have a raw material, wood, that we can get our hands on. Wood is the raw material, right? To get wood as a raw material is easy. It's plentiful. It's cheap. Okay, and selling wood is not a profitable exercise. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you take that wood and you have a business that takes that wood and turns it into a desk or a chair or a desk and a chair, right? That process that it just undertook created a synergy of different economic principles. One being employment. Somebody had to make it. Somebody had to take the time to make the desk. Another effect that it pulls into place is the business itself. So whoever the employee works for, is now involved in this. But then also, it takes it from a block of wood, which is, relatively cheap, to a finished product. And the finished product, that process by which something becomes a raw material to which it becomes a finished product, that's where the money's made. Because now I'm selling that desk for $150 when it wasn't worth $150. It's probably worth maybe, $20, $50, whatever the case may be, but now it's worth triple that. Okay, I'm gonna go a little bit deeper.